a school classroom, what comes to mind? Those signature desk chairs? Arts and crafts? Maybe even those broken crayons. As we head into the new school year, you can now add in the following: active shooter drills, banned books, uncertainty on whether to discuss topics like race and gender. It's just some of the things that teachers will have to navigate through this year, and today we're hearing from them directly on how they plan to do just that.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Tammy Fields. We're here for Justice for All inside the classroom. I want to introduce you to our special guests that are here with us today. We want to start with Stephanie Meyer. Thank you for being here with us. Stephanie is a social studies teacher and a college professor. Sitting right next to her, Tanika Bango Cooper. She is a community partnership school director. And Bobby Aganina, an English teacher. Thank you all for being here with us. We appreciate your time. So we want to jump right in. I know this is a topic that we've talked about a lot. This is Stop the Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees Act. A lot of people will know it. I know critics will also call it the Stop Woke Act. It's called that for short. It really regulates how schools and employers can talk about race and gender. And we know that talking about critical race theory is off limits in kindergarten through 12th grade, though through our research we have learned no schools have been teaching critical race theory. So let's talk about that. And I'll start with you, Stephanie. What are your thoughts on this, on the Stop Woke Act?
So I think that this is an important bill that was passed, and it's an important law. I have seen and talked to many teachers in our district who have been very concerned about some of the professional development training and some of the materials in some of that professional development. And so I think that, you know, the general consensus among the teachers that I've spoken to is that they're happy that some of those materials will no longer be allowed to be used in some of the professional development training.
Can you speak to anything very specific that really bothered them in that training?
I think some of the books that they were being asked to read and some of the I don't want to say specifically what books, but there were books and there's been materials that have been, you know, given to teachers as handouts and things like that. And I think they were really concerned about some of it. Just, you know, it building a divide, I guess, between, you know, other teachers and professionals. And so I definitely see why teachers and many people are supporting the bill.
And Tanika, your thoughts on Stop the Wrongs?
So I think that when we talk about like a Stop Woke and just the acronym and using woke, I think it's a play on words and society and just maybe dividing or being a little bit more divisive. I think anytime that you want to be able to create an environment of exclusivity, that you want to be able to include all people in their feelings and consider that. So I don't necessarily think that it's something that is necessary. I think it is a scare tactic and a play on words and how we're able to give diversity training so that people are understanding in the classroom and outside of the classroom, and how we deal with different scenarios and inside the classroom.
Bobby, what are your thoughts?
Sure. So I teach English, right? So we deal with a lot of literature. I have never in my 13 years taught critical race theory. I don't know a single other educator in any school that I've worked at that has taught critical race theory. I have never been given materials that would be considered with this ban, the Stop Woke. So I strongly disagree with the legislation. What I think they could have done is instead empower educators and give us even better materials, right? And actually fund our public schools and our schools, and instead of legislating something that's not happening and it's unnecessary. It's completely unnecessary.
Stephanie, what are your thoughts about teachers who might feel a different way getting these kinds of materials? I know that the spirit in which those materials are given are based on inclusivity and diversity and equity. But you say some teachers may feel uncomfortable with some of what's in it.
Right, and I think it's important too. Critical race theory is not a class that we teach. It's not. Critical race theory is a philosophy, and so I definitely agree that it's not being taught per se in our classrooms as a class or as a today, guys, we're going to learn critical race theory, but critical race theory is a philosophy, and it's a lens in which you look at the past or you look at today and whatnot. And so there has been some instances and some materials, and I've seen them in our district. Many of the teachers have gone to the district and complained. Many parents have complained. And I guess maybe it depends on what district you're in, and maybe your perception or your belief system or your understanding of critical race theory and its origins. But it most definitely has been an issue in our district in the past. And I'll say this, I'll say that, everybody has the right to be represented, and we absolutely need to be inclusive to everyone. And I think that should always be a part of our professional development. But when you look at the professional development that I've seen and that many of the teachers have spoke up about in our county, in our district, almost all of the professional development was centered around race. And I think that was disturbing, because our teachers do need good professional development. Our teachers do need, we do need more training in different areas. One of the things that I think we need to talk about in our school districts is discipline, for example, and how do we better serve our students in applying fair consequences for, disruptive behavior and things like that. So I agree that, there are other things as a district and at the state level that we could be focusing on. But I definitely do see that there has been instances of materials and books and professional development trainings that have made people uncomfortable. And I think anytime we kind of say, well, you're this or you're that, and we kind of put people in a box, it feels marginalizing. And I think we should, we need to be more unified.
Yeah, and so even in that, I think that, it's really difficult to be able to not face, to not face uncomfortable conversations. So I think that when we talk about and use the word uncomfortable, we have to be careful in even using that, because it is difficult to have uncomfortable conversations, but you can't fix what you don't face. So when we talk about, trying to move our country and our community forward, we have to have hard conversations. And sometimes that means making people uncomfortable. But it doesn't mean that it's not necessary. So I think necessary conversations are, we have to have uncomfortable conversations, and we don't get to, erase the past and, at the expense of making one person feel demarginalized and not addressing issues. There are plenty of conversations that take place, in the classroom that make people uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that it's unnecessary. So I think, when we talk about, moving a country forward and being inclusive and including everyone in what that forward mobility looks like, there are uncomfortable conversations that need to happen. But when you label it as critical race theory and, different philosophies and how we teach that, I think that's where the play on words come in, and those are scare tactics to be able to really have hard conversations to be able to move, our society forward.
Well, speaking of tough conversations that we're having when it comes to the classroom and these new laws, there's one thing we also want to talk about, and that is besides race, and that is what happens when we talk about sexual identity and gender orientation in our classrooms. That too is a very hot topic. We're going to jump into that when we come back right here on Justice for All Inside the Classroom. Welcome back, everyone. Justice for All Inside the Classroom. We are talking about hot topics that our teachers are going to be facing in the classroom, how it will impact not only them, but their students as well. We have some guests who are here with us, and we're going to jump right back into the conversation, this time speaking about parental rights in education. It stops classroom instruction when it comes to sexual identity or gender orientation. Critics have called it the Don't Say Gay bill. I'm going to start this time with Bobby because we didn't hear from you at the very end of the last segment. So what are your thoughts on how this will impact teachers in the classroom? There was some thought that teachers were teaching about gender orientation and sexual identity. You say what?
Right, which again doesn't happen in the classroom, right? Those conversations are driven by our students, right? Me personally, I'm a gay teacher, openly gay teacher. And I want my students to know that it's okay to be gay and it's okay to say gay. And if they're transgender, if they're lesbian, or even questioning, I think it's really important those conversations to have. Are we as teachers creating those conversations? No, but I think it's important that we create a safe environment and safe space for them to have those conversations.
Tanika, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I don't know of curriculum that addresses that in the classroom as well. I think that these are student-led conversations, and so the concern is that you know, number one, teachers don't know what the law means and what it means. You know, like, hey, you know, at one point we're having teachers where do I have to take pictures down of me and my, you know, significant other? What does that mean? So that they are making sure that they're following the parameters of it. But secondly, the concern is, you know, the impact on students. And so what do those conversations look like, and how do you create a safe place for students to be able to have those conversations? As a parent, you know, you want to know all of the things that are happening with your child, but additionally, if your child isn't safe being able to say something, you want a safe adult to be able to have those conversations. So the concern is that I work in a high school, and so when those conversations or students bring up those conversations, what does that look like? And how do you safely, you know, guide a student to the appropriate person to have that conversation with, but also not put them in danger at home? You know, and what does that look like? You know, when they go home, if they are unsafe or uncomfortable with having those conversations with their parents and they're not ready to have it yet, what does that look like? And so I think the concern is what it means, the impact on the student, not necessarily the parent.
Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
So I think really the most important portion of this bill is the first part that nobody really is focusing on right now, and that is the portion of the bill that affects any student K through 12 and their family and their parents. And what that part of the bill says is that school districts cannot withhold any information from the family that might impact the emotional, the social, or the physical well-being of that child. And I think, you know, I'm a mom, and I know there is nobody who loves my children more than me. And I think it's inappropriate for any adult outside of an adult in the home, a parent, to be having these types of conversations with a minor child. And I think it's very inappropriate as well that information as important as something as you know, sexual identity be withheld from a parent. We've seen several instances here in the state of Florida where one in particular, this information was withheld from a child or from a parent, from a family, and this child attempted suicide at school twice before the family was notified of these conversations that had been happening between the guidance counselor and the student. And so again, this is very important that, you know, these conversations be had with parents. I just do not believe the narrative that you know, overwhelmingly parents are not going to support their children. I think that that's just not true. And I mean, I know as a mom that nobody loves my children more than I do. And I think parents have every right to be involved in these conversations, and they need to know anytime that the physical well-being, the mental well-being, or the emotional well-being of their child is, you know, could be impacted.
So Stephanie, let me just ask you this question, just to keep it 100 here. As a teacher, I am sure that you have called parents and emailed parents and sent them text messages to come see about their child when it comes to their academics. And not every parent is involved and runs up to the school when they hear from a teacher. So what do you do with a child that does not have that type of parental involvement and they need help and they're reaching out for someone, grasping for someone to be able to talk to about their feelings because they're looking for some help?
Right, and that's why I think it's important that we have mental health counselors available for our students, but in no way do I think that teachers should be having these conversations with students. If there is a concern in the home, I think we all would, if there's a concern in the home, a known concern, make sure that the authorities are aware, make sure that the appropriate, social worker knows and the guidance counselor knows. But again, it's not the teacher's role to talk to students about these types of things. I think, especially without their parents knowing. I know I would not want any adult who is not me or my husband talking to my child about something this important and this impactful on their life.
So Bobby, I want you to jump in here. And what are your feelings when you hear what Stephanie says? And not only for a student that might be grappling with this, but what about other students who don't have any skin in the game, but as teachers, your job is to teach them to be welcoming and understanding of people who might be different than themselves.
Right, so I'm just thinking about a student coming to me or any teacher and saying, Mr. A, I'm gay. I'm going to then go out them to their parents? Well, I'm not going to do that. That is an extremely emotional and difficult choice to even say that phrase to any person. And the first person you have to have that conversation with is yourself. So that they have that conversation with themselves and then they feel trust and supported to go to me or go to another teacher and say this. We're then going to turn around and tell their parents, guess what, your son's gay. Your daughter is a lesbian. Yes. We could be endangering that child.
Right, but I also think in the instance that I'm referring to that happened in Jacksonville, where a student actually attempted suicide twice, and that family is now suing the school district for withholding that information. I also think that on the other side of this, it could be dangerous for the child, and that there's a perfect example of that. And so, like I said, if there is abuse in the home, a student comes to you and says, I'm being abused, this is why, and I have this on this is, part of that, right? We have to do what we've always been taught to do, which is to alert authorities, right? So we can make sure that that child is safe. But we have to look at the impact on both sides. And that's why, we can look to the incident that I'm referring to. And there's been other incidents throughout Florida, and I think that's why this bill was needed, because we need to make sure that parents are involved in their child's life. Now, I think particularly when we're talking about much younger kids, like, for example, middle schoolers, is this where this incident I'm talking about, this child, I believe, was in 6th or 7th grade, the child that attempted suicide. Parents need to be part of those conversations. And in no way am I saying that, children shouldn't, accept each other for who they are and be loving. But at the same time, we need to make sure that parents are involved. There is nobody in most instances that loves their children more than their family. And I think at the end of the day, parents need to be involved in these conversations.
I know you want to say more. I promise we'll pick it up right after the break. We're talking about this sensitive topic. This is also a topic that has been written by many, many authors, and many have written for teenagers in particular to share their stories in hopes it helps them. So we want to get to that next too. We're going to be talking about book censorship, though, in our state of Florida next, right here on Justice for All Inside the Classroom. Keep it here. Welcome back, everyone. Justice for All Inside the Classroom. We have 3 teachers here talking about some sensitive subjects. These subjects are going to be key when our students head back into the classroom. Bobby, who is a teacher too, was just talking to us about a sensitive subject, and one that is near and dear to you as we talk about book censorship. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to perhaps say some things you didn't get a chance to just a moment ago.
Sure. So when we talk about teen attempted suicide in the LGBTQ community, it is tragically high. The numbers, it's devastating. But we have a governor, a state, local leaders that say it's bad. Communities that shame them for being who they are. Laws passed directed against them. So to say that one school district or one bill, right, is protecting these students from an incident is completely untrue. The governor could stand up and say, you know what, it's okay to be gay, right? It's okay to be trans and identify with who you are and love who you want to love. But they don't do that. They create division and then literally take away a safe space for our kids. It's unfair.
And so I actually wanted to address that too, because even when we talk about parental rights and the right to know, I agree that no one loves their child more than their parents. But at the same time, I love my child enough to know that if they feel more comfortable speaking about a sensitive subject to one adult versus myself, I love them enough to be able to create that safe place wherever that is. And if they feel that that safe place isn't with me at this time, then I would more want for them to be able to have that discussion with someone that they feel safe with versus not having it at all, and it leads to an attempt on their life, or for them to not feel as if they want to be comfortable, as if they want to be in this world and in this society. So I think that when we talk about creating safe places and loving our children, if we're in education, we love children, and so we want to be able to create a safe space for children to learn and grow. And it doesn't mean that we want to parent them, but if that safe place is that, hey, we can have hard conversations and we're a free thinking society, then we want to be able to create a space where we have free thinkers, that you don't have to be gay in order to accept someone for how they want to live their personal life. So I think when we talk about, being able to censor, that information being available, we have to be careful about the words that we use and the tactics that we use to be able to make people think that this is a bigger issue than what it is. The issue is that, when we talk about abuse in the home and where a student comes from in their home, you don't get to see mental illness. Mental illness doesn't walk in the door and says, hey, I have mental issues, or I'm dealing with suicidal thoughts. Those aren't things that you can see. You can see physical abuse, but mental abuse you don't get to see. So you're not able to even get to those conversations until you have a conversation. So, how do you help a student, mitigate mental abuse if you don't have a conversation to be able to open those questions up? So I think as parents, we have to love our children enough to say, hey, listen, if I don't have what you need and you can get what you need from here, and if that means talking to a teacher and the teacher refers you to counseling, I'm all for that. We do need more mental health counseling in our schools. We need that. But what does that look like? How do we get to the mental health counselor if the teacher doesn't refer them? Like are we depending on students to self-refer? What does that look like? So I think that, when we talk about censorship and giving kids the opportunity to have information in books, because that's what we want to lead the conversation into. Like when we talk about, book censorship, if a kid is if we don't want them to be able to say it, and they have this burning desire into them, then they can say, hey, listen, well, let me look out and maybe seek some information from some books. But no, we can't do that either, because we want to create a free thinking society, but we really don't. We want you to think the way that we want you to think.
Let's ask Stephanie about that question in particular. I know that when it comes to books being pulled, we saw over the summer a real big push to pull books that perhaps had language in them, political ideas, religious beliefs, historical perspective, and sexual orientation, gender identity. Those books were really under the microscope. And there were some teachers that said, we want our students to learn a lot of different things when they're in our classrooms. And so, especially depending on age appropriateness, we are asking our kids to learn these things and really to read about these things. Right. What are your thoughts when it comes to pulling some books from the school shelves and library shelves as well?
Well, I think the key, and you said it, was age appropriateness. I have seen some books that were used. There's a particular book called It's Perfectly Normal that was supposedly age appropriate for 5th grade and up. And I can tell you, if you have not seen the book, there is it literally is pornographic material in the book. And I absolutely 100% do not think that a child should have access to that book without their parental permission. And so I am not for banning books. I actually am very opposed to banning books. I want to see if books have material that parents are not comfortable with. Again, we have to remember we're talking about minors. We're not talking about 19, 20-year-olds, college students. We're talking about minors. Minors who, you know, we don't let them drive until a certain age. We don't let them vote until a certain age. There's, you know, they can't consent to, you know, sexual activity until a certain age. And so this is why I think we need to make sure that, once again, parents are involved in these conversations. I would not want my 10-year-old daughter to ever see that book, It's Perfectly Normal, you know, until I decide that it is time and appropriate for her based on her own maturity and knowing her like no one else does as her mother. And so I'm not for banning anything. I'm for making sure that parents are aware if there are books that their children want to read that they're not comfortable with, then I think, you know, the parents need to be involved in those conversations.
Bobby, we spoke with an author who told us, and he had his book pulled not only in the state of Florida but across the country, but he told us that students can quickly find much worse information. He was sharing his life as a gay young man and his struggle with gender identity. He said young people can find this a lot faster on their cell phones and on television than they can find it in a book. And he said most students we've found don't read a book 200 pages to get to this information. What's been your experience?
Sure. We unfortunately have seen a lack of interest in reading a novel, right? And I think that's unfortunate. I think we all should be reading novels, right? It's, you know, as a educated society, that's what we should do. And they're fun too. Reading's fun, right? So with that, then if we're going, again, back to parental rights, then parents need to monitor internet usage. Yes. And apps, right? Because they can just take their phone out and, you know, search any of this material at any time. My huge concern as an educator is when we talk about banning books or giving parents oversight on which text should be taught, I want to make sure that we're not excluding facts. Right? We're talking about evolution, right? We're talking about historical events that actually happened. So I need different perspectives in our community that are still being taught, not just an agenda-driven parental oversight, right? Age-appropriate text. Of course, we can all agree to age-appropriate text. There's no problem there. However, once we start saying, well, this book has this worldview which I disagree with, or this group of facts that I disagree with, it should be discarded. That's the problem.
All right, we're gonna have to leave it there because we're quickly running out of time, and there's a big topic that we have to talk about now. It's a very difficult one. This is about gun violence and what we have seen here lately throughout our country when it comes to gun violence and mass shootings. It's an important topic, but it's one we definitely need to talk to. So everyone, stay where you are. Keep it here. Justice for All, Inside the Classroom. Back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. Justice for All Inside the Classroom continues. This is a subject that I think has really tugged at the heartstrings of everybody out there, and that is this violence that we're seeing, school shootings, and the horrible, horrible massacres. We have seen them right here in the state of Florida, but also in Texas just lately, and they have been heartbreaking. So I would like to talk to our panelists about that now. Jump right into this. Stephanie, let's start with you. I know that this is so different. As kids, many of us went through tornado drills, but now we're asking kids, young kids, to go through active shooter drills, and we're asking teachers in some school districts to pack heat to protect our kids. You say what?
So as a teacher, this is something that crosses my mind at least once, twice a week when I'm on campus. I think it crosses every parent's mind, every administrator's mind. It's awful that we even have to have this conversation. But I think Florida, you know, we've had our own tragedies here, and I actually just met recently Ryan Perry, who lost his daughter in the Parkland shooting, and talked to him a little bit about that. But I think that what we've done here in Florida and some of the provisions that we've put in place in our schools, particularly in our county, are definitely beneficial. I think that having our SROs on campus and actually having them on, being there on campus, knowing our students, getting to know our students, getting to know, the people that they're serving, and then also making sure that our schools are hardened. We have to make sure that the exterior of our schools is secure. And so I think that's a very important piece of this as well. And I think we saw that was really the failure in Uvalde recently. And so here in Florida, after the Parkland shooting, we have made a lot of changes. And I think a lot of those changes are keeping our schools safer. But I think too, depending on the district that you're in, more can be done.
Tanika, what are your thoughts? I know this is a tough subject, especially for parents and teachers, but there's been a thought that teachers perhaps need to pack heat. Anyone who knows a little bit about being that good person with a gun, it is very difficult to, in that kind of a situation, think quick, get a weapon that has been locked up, unlocked, and fire it to protect students. So can you see that as being a solution?
I don't see that as a solution. I don't think that, we need to look at arming teachers. I think in the totality of, just the school system in general, to add that burden onto a teacher, I think it's just really hard for, I think, a teacher to be able to kind of put that in their head as well when you talk about classroom management and keeping students safe. I think that I agree that, some of the protocols that we've been able to put in place are helpful. Is there more that we can do? Absolutely. I think when we talk about, drills and preparedness, we talked about the tornado, drills, but, our active assailant drills, I think are another tool that we utilize to be able to kind of be prepared to help students stay safe. I think taking those drills seriously and really being able to kind of pay attention and know what to do in that situation. When you're in it, it's really hard to say, what you would do, but I think having a forethought and being prepared really puts you in a better position. I think that we need to continue to, look at our SRO officers on our campus. I think that it does provide an added layer of security, and for those officers to get to know the campus and know who they see regularly on the campus and be able to identify faces that don't look familiar, and being able to, call those people out.
Bobby, we ask a lot of our teachers, a lot, year round, from sun up to sundown, and to ask them to pack heat to protect their students. You say what? I know we have a shortage of over 9,000 teachers, I think, in the school district and now in the state of Florida.
Right.
But to also ask perhaps that they take this on too.
Absolutely not. So for our school safety, we have school safety experts. And we do have SROs on our campuses. And I do think that's important. But with the SROs being on campus, I also think it's critical that they understand who they serve and they don't come in with bulletproof vests, right? They should be in a polo. Some students, some families have a negative view of law enforcement, that they're not there for their best interest. So we need to make sure that those students feel safe and comfortable going to that SRO as well. Also think adding more mental health counselors on campus is absolutely critical. But then I guess I'm gonna pull myself out of the classroom now. How many more of our kids have to be scared? Babies taken from us in a classroom before we start doing something about gun violence and banning assault weapons. Nobody should have an assault weapon, right? If you want a gun, fine, it's your right to have one. Nobody needs an AK-47. And our legislature here and at the federal government has done absolutely nothing. Yet our kids, our students who we love so much, and we as parents, you are as parents, and then we watch them die every single year, and it doesn't change. So what? Adding guns, more guns to the school is going to solve the gun violence? It makes no sense.
It's a tough subject.
It makes no sense.
Go ahead.
I would like to just add that, you know, one of the things that we often don't talk about is the fact that many of these shooters were known at a certain time somewhere along the way to be a concern. And some of the practices that we put in place in our schools for discipline and reporting discipline issues have lessened the ability for law enforcement and other agencies to kind of cross-share this information. So it's always, in hindsight, we go back and say, people will say, oh yeah, that person, you know, they said this, or they did this, or they posted this, and whatnot. So we always, you know, most of the time we can look back and see that there was a troubled past there. And I think that's why it's so important that if you see something, we say something. You know, we can't be afraid that we're going to hurt somebody's feelings, because people's lives are at stake. And so we have to do the right thing and report it when there's a concern.
All right. And
I think going on that goes back to, you know, some of the earlier conversation when we talk about, you know, mandated reporting. And so, you know, even in the Valdeldi shooting, the shooting in Texas, the mom knew some of that information. So when we talk about parental rights and information for teachers to be exposed to and directly telling telling the parent, I think a lot of that goes to information sharing. Like, now we want to censor, you know, that on one hand, we want to have open conversation and say, hey, see something, say something, but saying something to the proper authority or the proper person really matters. So it's not just enough for the parent to know what's going on. Sometimes law enforcement needs to know what's going on. Mental health counselors need to know what's going on. So it goes back to, you know, playing the field and, you know, reporting in one instance and, you know, reporting to, you know, a parent in another instance when we talk about, you know, your personal, you know, beliefs or feelings, because the parents knew, that mom knew that her child struggled with stuff. And I don't think that she didn't love her child. She may not have known the resources that were available to get him help. And so maybe she had a conversation with a teacher or an administrator on campus, and they could have gotten her the resources to be able to assist her student. But she did not do that. And it could have been out of, I don't know what reasons would allow her not to do that, but just being able to share the information and seeing something and saying something to the appropriate person really matters.
Okay, we're gonna have to leave it there. There's another subject I want to chit-chat about here. When the school bell rings on the very first day of class, what can we expect when it comes to major teacher shortages? Is this all due to teacher pay? Is it something else? We're going to talk about it right here on Justice for All, Inside the Classroom, when we come back. Welcome back, everyone. Justice for All, Inside the Classroom. We're talking about a massive shortage in the state of Florida when it comes to teachers. We know that we need more than 9,000 teachers at the beginning of the school year. So I want to ask this question of Bobby. You're a longtime teacher. What are you seeing? Why are teachers not staying, teachers and administrators?
Sure, so I'll be brief. It's a lack of respect. Lack of respect in our community, lack of respect in our Department of Education, from our school board, from our governor, and the respect goes to pay. We're all professionals. We should earn a professional wage, right? We should be able to teach what we know how to teach without interference. So for me, it's all respect.
Tanika, you say?
Yeah, I think the lack of respect is one, but I also think that there's a disconnect from, you know, what in practically what works, in theory what works, and what in practice works. So I think that there are so many mandates, including, you know, talking about, you know, teachers carrying guns, that it just makes it unreasonable for a teacher to really go into the profession that they, you know, educated themselves to be able to go in. So I think that there's a disconnect when it comes to what really happens in the classroom and the mandates that they put on teachers.
Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
So I think one of the biggest issues is the lack of discipline that is happening in our schools. And I think the other thing that we can point to is the fact that teachers do not get paid enough for what they do. We are asking teachers to do so much outside of just teach. And I think that's been a big concern in our district. Many of our veteran teachers barely got a raise at all, while the brand new teachers who are just starting out in their careers are making more, if not about the same, if not more, money than our veteran teachers. And so I think that's something we need to look at. We want those veteran teachers in our districts because they're the ones that can teach the new incoming teachers the craft. And so I think it's really important that we look at those things. And discipline is definitely a big issue in our schools. And no one wants to go to work and be disrespected. We want to go to work and teach our subjects and do our job and prepare our students for adulthood, the workforce, and college.
Okay, well, there's more to come, so stay with us. We want to talk specifically about solutions. Here on Justice for All, it is a big part of what we do. So keep it right here, Justice for All, inside the classroom. Welcome back, everyone. Justice for All Inside the Classroom continues. We want to hear from our special guests now, our teachers specifically, and folks who work in the classroom, about your message to parents, students, and lawmakers as we start a new school year. And I'll start with Bobby this time.
Sure. And again, Tammy, thank you for hosting this event, and it's been great joining you both here today. So for this upcoming school year, I would like our legislators, our governor, to just listen to us as teachers, right? And as educators, as professionals. Listen to us. We literally have entered the profession, not for the paycheck, but for the positive relationships that come out after our students leave us. I look at day one for me, at the first day of school, I'm not worried about my curriculum map or our standards or our test scores. It's the kids right in front of me, right? Building that positive, supportive, inclusive relationship on day one, that's the job. That's why we all became teachers, not to teach a pacing map or a curriculum guide. That's not why we're all teachers, right? It's to build that lasting impact with those students. And then for our governor and elected officials, pay us, support us, listen to us.
Tanika.
Yeah, so my message is a little different because I think my message is for our parents, and so for the community, that is a voting age that we have to be able to pay attention to the elected officials that we are electing into office and vote people in that has the heart of the community and your best interest or your community's best interest at heart. We can no longer sit on the sidelines and afford to not vote and continue to elect officials that don't have the community's best interests at heart. We can no longer afford to be able to keep people in office that are not for the community as a totality, and just continue to legislate from personal perspectives or bullying tactics that if we can agree to disagree and we don't have to agree on all of the policies, but you want to be able to enact legislatures that put positive legislation forward that will move an entire community forward and not just pigeonhole, specific issues and use scare tactics. So, I want our students to know that, ultimately when you come into the school, that you're coming into an environment that someone cares and loves and wants the very best interest, very best for you, and to be safe. And so, we want to be able to create a safe working environment for you to be able to come in, be a free thinker and learn and be able to go out into society and pay it forward to the next one.
Stephanie, what's your message?
So my message is really one from, so I have two. So from the teacher perspective, I want to thank the governor and the Florida legislature for doing away with the constant standardized testing and moving toward a progress monitoring version. I think that's really important. I think teachers and parents have been asking for that for a very long time, and so I think that's a great step in the right direction. I'm also excited as a parent and as a teacher about the renewed sense and push for parental involvement and that partnership between teacher and parent, which I think is vital for every single child in our community. We know the statistics show that when the teacher and the parent have a relationship, that child has a better outcome and achievement level. So I'm excited about those things. I think it's going to be a great school year, and I'm looking forward to getting back into the classroom.
Stephanie, Tanika, and Bobby, thank you very much for being here with us. It is always wonderful to hear from those who are really on the front line, educating our students and working with our students in the classroom. We're really forever grateful to you, so thank you for being here with you. It does mean a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's going to do it for us. Another Justice for All inside the classroom. Stay safe, everyone, and stay informed.